Okay.
The following interview was conducted with Tony Zamora for the Purdue University Oral History Program. It took place on Tuesday, October the 16th, 2007 at the TV studio in Stewart Center. The interviewer is Catherine Marquis, the Oral History Librarian. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about where you were born and your parents and siblings in your early years.
I was born in Chicago on February 16, 1930. My mother immigrated from South Carolina in the late 20s. My father was an immigrant from Mexico, and he came into Chicago, crossed the Laredo Bridge in 1924, and they both eventually met in Chicago, and so I'm a product of that meeting.
Okay. Do you have any siblings?
I had a brother, and he died in 1937. My mother died in 1940. Back in those days, very difficult times, we had to live, my mother and my father were separated, and she lived in what they call these garden apartments in Chicago, these apartments that were street level, and they had a dampness to them, and she contracted tuberculosis. She was placed in Mary Kelly who was a mayor at the time, had a very nice sanitarium, tuberculosis sanitarium, out on the north side of town, and she was able to get into that through friends. She went in 1935, and in 1940, in December, she died.
She was there that whole time, though? She was there the whole time? All 5 years?
Those 5 years, and I was only able to see her once a year, like at the 4th of July. And I could see her off a balcony. That was our only visitation up until she died in December of 1940.
Oh my goodness! What was your father? Whereabouts did you live? You lived with your father then?
I lived with my father, but my mother was discontent with my father, and she didn't want him to have me. I had a brother, and when my brother died, he became more interested in me because when my brother died in 1937, he then began to take more interest in me. Well, she didn't want that to happen for reasons I don't know.
Sure. Okay.
But she had me placed in a foster home. So I was raised by foster parents for many years.
Okay. Did you have any contact with your father during that time?
I sure did. My father had privileges to see me, and I would visit with him and so forth. And my stepmother, they lived on the west side, and the people that I was living with lived on the south side. So I had this south side, west side connection.
Where'd you go to high school? Tell us a little bit about being in high school.
I went to Jean Baptiste Point du Sable High School, which was one of the better schools on the south side. My foster parents wanted me to go to a good school, and I thought that at that time that Point du Sable High School was one of the better schools. Only 2 schools at that time that had black students, Wendell Phillips and Du Sable High School. So I went to Du Sable High School.
Okay. Well, any particular activities that you engaged in while you were in high school?
Yes, I was in track. I was on a track team.
Okay.
I did poetry reading and so forth. And I was very much, I've been interested in music all my life. And they had an outstanding music program at Du Sable under the leadership of Captain Walter Dide, one of the premier band directors at that time. But I never got involved with the band. I mostly am self-taught as a musician, dating back to all that period, and I read up a lot. I finally bought me a horn and a saxophone, and I started playing and learned at home.
Self-taught, right?
That's right.
Okay. After high school, then what were your plans when you went to college? How did that come about?
I didn't go to college.
Okay.
What
did you do after you graduated from high school?
Well, I found a job. And I worked several locations. I worked in factories. I worked for publishing houses. And I got involved in this printing business, lithograph, photo offset lithography. That's what they called it. And I really enjoyed that. Sure. And I stayed there until the University of Illinois took an interest in me. As a musician, I was doing performances around town, playing at parks in different locations and so forth.
As a group, with a group?
With a group. And they were aware that I was attracting people and a lot of interest and a lot of community people. In particular, a lot of college students would come out to hear us. And I had an outstanding band that was made up of college students, some that have gone on to greater heights today, and pretty famous today. And so that was the main key behind where I would go there. And so it just so happened that that popularity gained the attention of the University of Illinois. And when they went through that period where they were establishing a culture center over there, the Afro-American Cultural Program, they hired a director, Val Gray Ward, who was out of Chicago, and she only stayed 1 year, which was 1969-70. They hired me in 1970 as a director, and I was given, my musical knowledge was very respected, very much respected, and as a result of it, I was given a position in the School of Music of Research Associate. So I taught a class, and then established a lab band. They call them lab bands, where you come sort of like experimental playing and so forth. And then I directed the Culture Center there. And I must admit that that experience was one of the most rewarding that I'd ever had. I was just awed at the fact that I was going into higher education, and I had my own office and staff and everything, and it was just tremendous.
How long had the center been running for some time? Had the center been going for some time before you?
In 1969, there was turmoil and conflict on college campuses. It was during that time period when students were clamoring for cultural centers. There were riots in someone at Cornell University, and there were uprisings on different, and it was a very tumultuous period for universities because they didn't know what these students were clamoring for. In addition to that, the war in Vietnam was going on, and that helped to complicate matters a lot. So that part of it all helped me in terms of coming into the university, bringing something of credit, and being accepted by the students. The students just loved me, and they thought that I would make a good, they wanted me for their director, and that's how it turned out.
Good. In this time, did you keep in touch with your foster parents? Did you keep in touch with them?
Yes, I did. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they passed away right after I had left home.
Okay.
My mentor was my foster parent on the male side. His name was John Raymond Dennis, and he was from Eufaula, Oklahoma. And he was a brilliant man, and he was self-taught. And so I learned a lot from him.
Good. Because
he worked on these big presses and everything, and he was just outstanding, gear presses as they call them, for General Motors in LaGrange, Illinois. And so I learned a lot from him. I couldn't have had a better role model than Mr. Dennis.
Good.
Now, Mrs. Dennis, they were both from Champaign, Illinois. They came there and operated the food service at one of the residence halls there, and then eventually moved up to Chicago, and that's how we met each other.
Okay. What a small world. And then you ended up going there, right?
Huh?
Then you went to Champaign.
Yes.
Where they had come from. And how long were you there? And then that probably brings you to Purdue, is that right?
How long was I where?
How long were you in Illinois, and then your next step was?
I was at the University of Illinois. I have to tell you this story.
Okay.
I was appointed a director. I never was so overwhelmed in all my life. And I started my position in 1970. I only lasted 1 year. And the lady before me, she didn't last a year. A lot of pressure on the individuals who were in the capacity of leadership, because you were torn between trying to placate or show reference to the people that you were there to help, and then you had the university, so you're being pulled both ways. A tremendous amount of pressure. And so I said, this will kill me. There's no job that should take that much out of a person. So in 1971, I resigned after 1 year. I did a remarkable job there in that 1 year, and that still stands today in terms of the credit. Even in 1 year, I was amazed.
Very good. And then what happened? What next?
Well, I resigned, and I decided, well, I'll just play music. And there was a young lady from Champaign who was a Purdue student. Her name was Cheryl White Mason. And she came to visit me. She heard of my work. And she knew me, and she said, why don't you come to Purdue? We have an opening there. We have a cultural center. We'd love to have you. So I studied around, thought about it and everything. So I decided to visit. So I came over to visit the cultural center. At that time, Singer Buchanan, I don't know if you remember him.
And the name I remember.
Singer Buchanan was the coordinator of black student programs. So I came over here in 1972 to initially look at things and to see what the center was like. And I was really thought, well, this is another headache, another big headache.
Was it the house? Did they have the
house? It was a house
there?
at 315 University Street.
Where I first met you. When
That's
you were
correct.
There. Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that was the old Baptist Student Center. It turned out to be the oldest building on campus aside from University Hall. It was built in 1905. But anyway, I accepted. I was offered a position. I turned out to be the top candidate. I think there were 5 or 6 of us. And I was offered the position of directing the Culture Center by Mr. John C. Smalley, Jack Smalley, who was director of the union. I also was asked that I want a teaching position, but they have no school of music here, so I didn't want to take on another position that would put more pressure on me because it's such a drain on you trying to direct a program, particularly in those innovative fledgling years. But I was given an assistant to the director position at the Purdue Memorial Union. My role as the assistant director was to help the union, the Purdue Memorial Union, increase black participation and to assist them in terms of helping to get more students involved in the activities of the Purdue Memorial Union. So it was another tremendous task.
It sounds it, yeah. Okay. Well, when you were appointed in 1973, you said the general purpose of the Black Cultural Center, which was started in 1970, to serve the sociological, intellectual, cultural, and psychological needs of both black and non-black communities of the university. Its aim is to help foster understanding, cooperation, and mutual respect among the races. That's good. So now, as your director, what were some of the challenges and the mission and your interaction with staff? Tell us a little bit about your days with the Black Cultural Center.
Well, you have to understand that one of the things that happens when you come in with a program that's new to the university, there's a lot of suspicion.
It was a brand new program at that time.
Brand new program, okay. Misunderstanding, mistrust. But what fell on me was the fact that the students didn't know who I was. Who is this Antonio Zamora? They didn't perceive me as a black person. And so as a result of it, I was always under scrutiny, not only by the students, but by the university itself. So as a result of it, I had to come in and somehow demonstrate that I was credible and validate all that I was capable of doing. Very tough years. And as a result of it, I just came in, didn't change anything. I decided that I would just do hard work and I would win them over by demonstrating that my intentions were good and I was committed to that program and to do the best that I could.
Sure.
And that's what happened.
Okay.
The notion of...
Let me ask you one thing. Did they have any kind of a program in existence prior to you coming? Was there any... The house was there, so was there anything...
Well, they did.
Oh.
They had, when they established the Cultural Center there at 315, they really had initially a house manager. Okay. That person was Nettie Hubbard. They asked a Purdue graduate student, Johnny Houston, would he put aside his PhD for 1 year and serve as a interim director until the search could be completed. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I came in after that search. I was selected and came in to be the director.
Okay.
He had established some things. They had the key thing I think the university was looking at, and as well as I saw, was that they were looking for something to quell the students, to get them somehow to adjust to the university and not have a lot of things going on that was disruptive. One of the major things about the Cultural Center was it was employment opportunity. So we had 25 jobs there were created. And they were student jobs where we paid the student scales, and then they were work-study jobs. And so what they had done was the students kept up the center themselves. Service workers, librarians, and they had started a small library, but they didn't have a full-time librarian. It was a student who operated the library, Sharon Heiler at the time. So I had to meet all these people, and I said, well, this is a tremendous opportunity because the things called for, the budget called for, the funding for employing 25 students, of which some of them would be workshop coordinators who were the heads of these workshops in dance, drama, theater, choral singing, and martial arts. And so as a result of it, I started taking those programs and developing them and trying to get more interest and attract students to come into the Culture Center so that they would demonstrate something that would help us to build on what needed to be to represent the university and the Culture Center very well.
Sure. Okay. So you had something to start with anyway. You had something to start with.
Well, yes, I did. Sure. And I implemented a lot of new things. I came from Illinois with a lot of ideas.
Good. Well, that's what we want to share that with researchers. Go ahead. Some of the things that you
Well,
implemented.
the first thing I did was to coordinate those workshops, create a organizational chart, well, called like who does what, because students, I think at that time, were just randomly just doing things. So I had to sort of wait it out until the dust settled, until they found out that I was serious. And as a result of it, I had no help. But in the interim, some graduate students and other people saw that I was alone and decided to come and help me and asked me, did you need help? One of them was Phoebe Bailey, a couple other ones, Bailey Baker. And you need help. And they came over and helped me to get things started. We created a newsletter, and including writing a prospectus for it, and then employing 4 students. And what we did with each position, we found out something that would fit into that would fit their career objectives, sure, like reporting or writing and so forth. And that's how we got them to be involved. And then we started a cultural arts festival. The Cultural Arts Festival was to allow those groups to come together and to commemorate the founding of the BCC in 1969. And with that, we started putting on these extravaganzas and so forth. That happened in 1974. Okay. And it went on and it's still going today.
That's right. One of the first was you started that artist in residence. You had an artist in resident program. That was something new. And Stanley Butts was one of the first ones that was here in 1977.
Well, the artist in residence program was created to provide professional assistance to the workshop coordinators, okay, by having someone who could show them along and help them to commemorate, to create and do things with some substance to it. And they were excellent. We had Stanley Butts, Darlene Blackburn in dance, different people, and who did I have in theater? I had somebody. My mind's a little foggy on some of it. So much to remember.
Oh yeah.
But we had an artistic director for each one of those programs.
Mm-hmm. And you had the Black Voices of Inspiration.
I named that group.
Was that was a new group? Or
well, what it was that it wasn't a group. It was a new group.
Oh. What
happened is that 3 students came to see me. One from Africa, a young lady from Orange, New Jersey named Deborah Silver, and said they wanted to start a choir. And I said, that's great, because the University of Illinois had an outstanding choir over there called the IU Black Chorus, and I knew the director. And what happened is that we started out with these students coordinating everything, and it kept getting better and better and larger. And eventually it grew to 140 students. That was the magnitude of how large it had gotten.
This Black Voices of Inspiration?
The Black Voices of Inspiration.
Wow.
BVOI was the acronym for them. And just one of our most requested groups, because they performed off campus, right, and on campus. I also established a cultural exchange program.
What was that? Tell us about that.
The cultural exchange program was to allow these groups to have an opportunity to perform somewhere. And that cultural exchange meant that I had contacted other Midwest universities who had similar activities going on, and we would exchange. We would go to their campus, and they could come to our campus. It flourished. It just flourished.
Good. Another group that you had was the Jakarta dance troupe. Was that something new, or had that been in existence before?
Well, that was there when I came there. Johari means the jewel. That's a sweet Swahili word. Means the jewels. They were already in progress, and a young lady named Deborah, I can't remember her last name now, had started that group from Gary, and I began to look at how we could strengthen them. And I brought in, there was several young girls who were from Gary who had dance skills and so forth, and technique and teaching ability, and they brought that thing up, and we would put on these productions. So I would buy materials for them and get everything for costumes and so forth, and they would put on it, and they were just a powerful group. They still are today.
That's right, yeah. You had quite a few. That Cultural Arts Center was good. And then you had the New Directional Players was another group, and the Haraki, the Writers group, too.
Haraka.
Right.
Yeah, Haraka, which means to express. And so these young people had a lot of things that they had picked up that were different. And I went right along with the program because I had an understanding of it and a feel for what I guess feel for Africa and its relationship to African Americans, and that was a core thing that I could use to bring them into the fold of what we were doing.
Right. Did you have any help about an assistant director? Did you have any assistants helping you over there?
Well, what happened was that I created 3 new positions.
Okay.
FTEs. I created a position of assistant director. I hired our first assistant director. I also created a position for a full-time librarian. We only had a student librarian. I created a full-time librarian, and then I created a position for a night operations manager, because the center was open from 8 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, and a lot of activities went on at night. So there needed to be somebody responsible who was there to coordinate things and see that everything went along smoothly.
Right. Yeah. You had quite a speakers listing. Some of the ones that were there that you had, Muhammad Ali and Julian Bond and Stokely Carmichael came at different times and talked. How did those come about? Was that something that you would touch base with them, or?
Well, a lot of these people I didn't know personally, but I knew how to contact them.
Okay.
Some of them I did know through other people who knew me. And what happened was that Julian Bond, one of the best people we brought here was James Baldwin, brilliant man. He was sick when we brought him here, and we went to his room and talked to him, and he was just a brilliant man. Maya Angelou, just a brilliant woman. She liked sherry. So my wife and I went to her room, and she pulled out this bottle of sherry, and we just talked and talked and talked. So they like to share things with you and talk with you. Nikki Giovanni, and I also focused the speakers and things, the artists in residence and speakers, prominent speakers. And so we would look at people as historians. I had a collective of historians, John Hope Franklin, who established the Phi Beta program at Purdue. He instilled that program here, Phi Beta Kappa, I believe it was. Yeah. And then John Henry Clark, a noted historian. It's unfortunate, mostly people are deceased now.
Well, you had Judge Higginbottom came here too.
Well, Higginbottom came through Africana Studies.
Oh, was that a program that was in?
That was that was the Black Studies program.
Okay, okay.
The whole notion of sister programs, the Black Studies program was strictly about teaching courses on African American information. Our arm was, and I looked at that as the theoretical component. I saw the Cultural Center as the performing arts component. The theoretical, one was theoretical and the other was, I remember the word slipping me now, applied.
Applied, okay.
We used the applied arts our thinking was that what they learn in the classroom can be applied as a result of it, and we'd use those programs to bring that along and to reinforce who they were, confidence building, and give them more knowledge of how that can work. It was great, just great.
Mm-hmm. It worked very well then. Then of course you had many things. You had the an after dinner lecture series. You just had and you had Samuel Hay at one time, who was the chair of the African Studies program
Yes.
at that time here. Okay, and then one of the things, Black History Month, that was kind of a big thing that.
Well, that was in vogue when I came in, and I just took it and embellished it.
This takes a lot of planning, though, doesn't it, to get these programs going?
Well, I was a workaholic. And I felt that a great deal of respect for the students, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. As a result of it, I kept building on these different things and implementing things that I knew that would work. And I would discuss things with them, because I wasn't just doing it on my own. I wanted to be in tandem with what they wanted to do and what they appreciated and would acknowledge and be involved in. So that was that particular part of it.
Yeah, and then you have alumni. You had an alumni speaker at one time, a series, and then did some of the alumni come back and you kept in they kept in touch with them?
Well, what I did was I had an alumni speaker series.
Okay.
And what that was to do was to build off of the other speakers who came in, because there were alumni who were very successful. Joe Very Carroll, I brought him in.
I saw you had him here.
Eugene Parker, different ones who had made their presence known in the world. Mm-hmm. And as a result of it, they came in, and their interaction with the students was just tremendous, because they could share things relative to their period at Purdue, and then share that with them, so that they would grow from that. Right. I brought in Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis, and one of the most amazing things, Ossie Davis, we had a conference room in the Culture Center, and we would bring in people. When Ossie Davis would come, he would come into the room, and he'd tell these stories, just mesmerize everybody. It was just wonderful, because he spoke of a time that he and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King all met at his house, and how they discussed things, the crisis of what was happening in America and so forth. And I think the students just bewildered.
What enrichment you're bringing into their lives.
Tremendous enrichment.
Sure.
For me too.
That's right, exactly. And then, of course, you had the Dr. Lowry came one time for Martin Luther King Day. Joseph Lowry, who had worked with him.
Yes.
Yeah, so he came too. One thing, you had kind of a big celebration for the 10th anniversary of the Black Cultural Center. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, what happened was that I decided that we should have an anniversary, and that the 10th.
It was 10 years, so you had a date.
Yeah, 10, I had a date to do it. It was December the 5th and the 6th, 1980.
Okay.
And we put on the 5th and the 6th was to commemorate the founding of the Black Culture Center in 1969 on December the 4th. And so we put this big event on and had this 10th anniversary. But one of the main things we did was we put on a Black alumni reunion, Purdue Black alumni reunion. In addition to that,
did that association exist before that, or was there a Black alumni group?
Never. Nothing ever done like that. And so in order to find out who the Black alumni were and where were they, I went to the Purdue Alumni Association. Well, I found out they hadn't codified any of the records of alumni. By that time, they didn't have addresses or nothing. They did, but they didn't codify them by race. Yeah. So I got a pool of students and sent them to research and look at all the debris to identify the blacks that they could. And out of that, we come up with about 1,000 Black alumni.
Wow. That must have taken some time.
It did. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, hard work. And so we found it and went to the Alumni Association and then see if we could match them up with addresses. And we sent all those letters out, I think 1,200 letters, to the different ones that, and a lot of these people were deceased or didn't want to come back for a variety of reasons, or couldn't come for other commitments. But we finally ended up getting 160 black alumni to come back to Purdue and for this particular event. And it was just fantastic. Some of them were pleased to come back. I guess, to me, in my opinion, most of the black alumni were just gratified that they had made it through Purdue, because it was a trying situation for them. So they had been successful and so forth. And so then we kept just making progress, and I guess I'm kind of stuck right there.
What was the class for the oldest class that came? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I don't remember.
You went all the way up to maybe 19?
Well, we didn't do that. We didn't. We just were so glad to get the people that came here.
Okay.
And then that was the first time. They hadn't been back, hadn't thought about coming back in years. And I don't think, unfortunately, Purdue had never outreached to them. But they had no way of knowing who was who, just based on racial identity.
What sort of program did you have? What sort of activities? What sort of activities did you have for them?
I had a series of seminars, and I looked at all of the areas that the various people had matriculated in and set up a series of seminars here in the Stewart Center on engineering, athletics. People had a variety of disciplines, and we focused around that. In fact, I should have brought that program. And we recorded all of them. And we brought in different people. I'm trying to remember some of them. But
did Julian Bond come for that?
Huh?
Did Julian Bond, was he one of the speakers for that one or not?
No,
or
he
another
wasn't.
time?
No,
okay.
he wasn't.
Okay.
But the nice thing of that is that the person that I guess I should tell you this history. It's not a beautiful story, but when in 1946, that's when A. Leon Higginbottom enrolled in Purdue as a freshman to be an engineer. He was not allowed to live on campus because even as a freshman, and all co-eds were required to live in campus housing. When he went to get campus housing, he was told that he couldn't live there. And so he lived in a resident home, and he was placed up in an attic in the wintertime, and snowed through there. It was cold, and he couldn't study. So he made an appointment to see the chief administrator, the university president, and he explained the situation to the president, and the president told him, says, well, and he wrote a book about this. There's a book in the library called In a Matter of Color by A. Leon Higginbottom. The president told him, said, Higginbottom, that's the way it is. And if you don't like it, you can just leave. That's verbatim. And so he did leave. And he went on to become a federal judge, U.S. federal judge in the state of Pennsylvania. And Africana Studies invited him back to speak as a speaker some years later. And the university then President Hanson invited him to his home afterwards, and I guess they made atone for whatever went down, but it was just wonderful. Yeah.
He passed away a few years ago, didn't he?
He did. He
yeah,
did.
right.
A wonderful man. He was a big man and very articulate and impressive, you know.
Oh, sure.
And I spent time with him, and I really enjoyed him a lot.
You're like me. You learn a lot from the people that come, and they share, just like the oral history program. For the researchers, you're sharing your experiences, and it'll enhance the history of the university, which is great. I mean, that's what we're doing, which is wonderful.
In addition to that, I have great admiration for Frederick L. Hovde. Because of what happened to A. Leon Higginbottom, you know, things just don't die. They roll over and somebody else inherits it. There was a man named Carter, James Carter, who was an educator in Indianapolis. And he brought his daughters up here to attend Purdue in the 50s. He had two daughters, and he brought with him a professional doctor, a white doctor, who was a colleague and a respected colleague. And he went over and applied for housing. And he was told that there was no housing available after they found out they were black. So then the doctor, who was his friend, went over to housing and said, I have a daughter, wanted to enroll her in housing. And they said, yeah, we have housing. So they took that information and went to the Dean of Students office, or they had Dean of Women and Dean of Men at that time. Mm-hmm. And also Helen Slayman. I don't know if you remember her or not.
I met her a few times,
but she was a fighter for women's rights and a fighter for things that needs to be justice, to do justice to the students' rights. She, anyway, sort of tried to carry that case on to President Hovde. President Hovde eventually, they went to this Mr. Carter went to President Hovde and explained the situation to him. President Hovde told him, says, Mr. Carter, the timing is not right. It just isn't the time to do this. And maybe just give me time and I will such and, the country is in such a state that we just couldn't do this. I guess it's just a lot of people, a lot of prejudice. And because of that, in 1969, 100 students marched on Hovde Hall with bricks in their hand and carrying a banner that said, "The fire next time," which was a statement made by James Baldwin. I think that impacted on President Hovde, and he then went around the business of creating the Black Cultural Center. He established the Black Cultural Center in 1969. Him and another scholar that came here from Michigan, I can't think of his name now. What's his name? Anyway, they created, and I have these documents. I have all these documents of the letters that were written, and Hovde's speech. He gave a tremendous speech, and about
when the center opened, or at
that
the
was
time?
before it opened.
Okay.
And he said, "We're going to do this, and we hope that you would take advantage and use this, and that it would benefit all people."
Sure.
And that was put it in motion. That started everything to rolling. Just a great man. I have, and there's a part to the story I think is really interesting. When we had that 10th anniversary, I invited him, and he was up in age then.
Sure.
And he came to the event and he spoke. And he said, and I gave him a plaque. It was a founder's plaque. We gave out founder's plaques. And when I gave him that plaque, he just looked at it and stared at it. And he said, I didn't think anybody would remember. It touched me, brought tears to my eyes.
I bet. I feel the same way, yeah.
And it just touched me because he was someone who was an intellectual. He was, I don't know if you know of Harris. There's a guy named Harris. I'm trying to think of his name.
Was he at Purdue?
Was a local athlete, lived here, went to Purdue, and played basketball with Hovde's son, and would come by the house all the time and talk and so forth. And we communicate today. We're a real good friend. Harold Harris, he was a professional musician, and he played piano up at the club up in I'm trying to think of the club up in Chicago.
In someplace in Chicago. Okay.
Where they had these bunnies.
The Playboy?
Playboy Club. He played at the Playboy Club, and he would come down here because his family lived. I think he was born and raised here. Harold Harris is still alive today, and we meet and talk because he commends me on the work that I've done.
That's good. Oh. You talked about the library, and that really is kind of strong. You built up the library. You said you got a librarian in the Black Cultural Center, right? Library, which was really
the thing
good.
was that when I was at Illinois, they didn't have a library, and I felt it was very important for us to have a library, although the University of Illinois has one of the best libraries in the country. And so I hired 2 library majors, media, in media, library science students, to implement and build that. And they had a person over there who was their mentor, teacher, and so forth. So when I came to Purdue, I was surprised that they had a semblance of a library there, but it wasn't organized. It was organized, but they didn't. My point was, how do you institutionalize things where they'll last? And so
or you can find things when you need them.
That's right. And so that's why I moved towards the library. And we created library aides, which were student positions, which allowed them to have a job.
Sure.
But if they were in the library sciences, that would enhance their careers.
Exactly, right. Exactly right. Let's talk a little bit about some of your honors and awards. You got in 1980, the University of Illinois, the Black Alumni Association gave you the Cultural Arts Award.
Yes.
Yes. And then you got, how about the Sagamore of the Wabash? Did you get a Sagamore of the Wabash?
Yes, I did.
How'd that come about?
I think that came about through Sheila Clinker.
Well, how did they let you know?
I think she let me know. I was surprised.
Did they have some sort of an event? They had to do something.
No, I just, it was at my retirement dinner. My retirement dinner was in 1995 in the Union, and they put on a real nice, it was just great. And we had just all kind of people from all over the country who came, and one of the things they presented me with was a plaque from the Purdue Black Caucus of faculty and staff, and then Sheila Clinker was instrumental in seeing that I got a Sagamore of the Wabash.
Oh, that's nice.
It was just fantastic.
Yeah. You also have the Tony Zamora Endowment Fund. Was that set up at your retirement?
That really was.
Tell us a little bit about that fund.
Well, it initially started out as a Purdue and the Black Cultural Center Endowment Fund. I implemented that and set that up and contributed to it, and I got other people. Among those people who contributed were many whites: Jack Smalley, John O'Haver, Melvin Hughes from the Union staff, because I was on the Union staff, and they were my colleagues.
Sure.
And so they knew me and respected me, and as a result, and then a lot of people across. Harrison Flint was a major contributor, and so it built up and kept building up and building up. So when I retired, Renee Thomas changed the name to Tony Zamora, Antonio Zamora Endowment Fund.
Okay.
And that's what it is today.
Yeah, that's very nice. Why'd you decide to retire? You could have stayed on. What brought your thoughts about retiring?
I was worn out. I guess I had given an awful lot, and my health was not in the best. I had a major ailment, pheochromocytoma. I had bilateral tumors on my adrenal glands, a rare ailment that was, it was a case study because I went up to Mayo Clinic, and they removed one of the adrenal glands. I had an adrenalectomy. They did a full adrenalectomy on my right side, on my left side, and did a partial over here. The partial allowed me to, they said if they removed both of them, I would have to be on prednisone for the rest of my life. But we'll take a chance. If we can do this partial, if that works and kicks in, you'll be okay. And that's what happened.
Good. That's nice. Yeah.
I've been blessed.
That's right. Okay. Now your retirement. You kept active in the music. What other things have you been involved in since you retired?
I keep involved in the music. I speak on occasions, and I am now called upon by many Purdue alumni to mentor their kids. The strange thing is I've seen, and you probably noticed this too, the students that I had when I was here, they're now sending their kids here, and they want them to meet Mr. Zamora. So that's
Yeah. Is the Black Alumni, is that group still going, isn't it? The Black,
yes, it is.
So you really sort of started that as a result of that 10th anniversary?
Well, what I didn't start it.
Oh.
What happened was that we had that
event for the anniversary, and you got the names of the people.
What happened was that a group of the alumni came to me and said, "You've done a wonderful thing. We want to recognize you, and we want to carry this on. So we're going to come back and see that we can implement a Purdue Black Alumni Organization." I named that PBAO. Supposed to mean something about progression organization. And it has now taken off and it's on its own. I have nothing very much to do with it now, except I know a lot of the alumni and so forth.
Right. And they come back for
they come
back once a year or something, don't they?
They come back. They have their meetings. They put out a newsletter, and they were under the auspices of the Purdue Alumni Association as a special sponsorship, and I've just worked out wonderfully.
Yeah. Now, when you came, Dr. Hansen was the president, and then Dr. Barron came in. So you served under two presidents, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
and
correct.
I saw where you had an open house when Dr. Barron came.
That's right.
And Dr. Hansen, did they come over to the house as well? The Hansens come over to the Black Cultural Center?
Oh, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy was an advocate of the arts and a wonderful lady. I guess she always was doing things to get her husband to do certain things. She was pushing for those things. I went to her funeral, and
sad.
Her husband, Arthur, was, as you know, he was a Purdue graduate.
Sure.
And so I had a good relationship with him. He supported what we did. The funny thing is that President Beering was the person who was instrumental in that building being built.
The new facility that they have.
The new facility.
Uh-huh.
Because he had stated that if the alumni and so forth, if they could raise, I think, $1 million, he would put $1 million to it. And that went on, and they raised $3 million, I believe. And so it was through his intention. One of the things he said that really got to me, he said he didn't want the ghost of Frederick Hovde to haunt him. And so, so he knew what Hovde had done, and so he carried on and followed up on it.
Yeah, that worked out very well then.
Very well.
Right. And you still do some performing, don't you? You come here in the summer, and the saxophone and you are just big buddies, right?
That's my right
and
on.
You say jazz is America's gift to the world. There's no other genre like it. I think that's great.
Well, I'm of the opinion. I have a feeling about music that may be a little bit different. I think that jazz, which is a creative art form, I don't like the word jazz. I don't know. I know what it connotates, what it meant back in those days, jazzmen and so forth.
Oh.
But it's creative music, and that it comes from the spirit of the soul. It comes with allowing you to improvise and to compose and to do things that brings out certain qualities in life. I think music is an important facet to get people to come together, soothe the savage beast. It had helped me throughout my career and my lifetime to weather all storms. And out of it, I have sustained and attained a spiritual richness that has helped me in terms of what I felt that I was asked to do to improve the lives of all people.
That's very nicely said. How about, let me ask this, how about an outstanding event in your life? Do you have an outstanding event, something that comes to your mind? Any outstanding event that you could think of?
Well, I guess there's several. Certainly the endowment fund, because that would help students. Right. And that has grown. And just fact, I read a BCC newsletter, and there's a young lady just been awarded a scholarship. The other thing was that I first came here, the lady that I met that I'd heard a lot about was Helen Bass Williams. And you remember her?
Yes.
She was actually not wanted here because she was known to be an activist and so forth. But they hired her as a educator, and she implemented that learning center, which is now called the Academic Success Program, that's still at Purdue. That's the first scholarship named after an African American woman at Purdue. I'm very proud of that.
That's nice. Did she come from Illinois? Did you know her before she came here?
No.
Oh, okay.
She was from Culp,
Oh,
Illinois.
oh, okay.
But she had been down south during the Freedom Fighter days, and she told me about those experiences, and just unbelievable.
I bet.
How they would intimidate them and do certain things to them. A very headstrong and committed lady who was in the Fannie Lou Hamer category. I brought Fannie Lou Hamer to several universities, to Illinois. I tried to get her here, but she took sick and couldn't appear.
How about family? Where'd you meet your wife? Tell us a little bit about your family. Where'd you meet your wife?
I met my wife in Champaign, and I have a wonderful wife. We've been married now going on 57 years. We got married in 1959. And we had our 40th anniversary and invited 300 people in. Just fantastic. And
300 of my closest friends, right?
that's right. It was just great. And I paid for everything. My wife said, well, I've never really had a party. I said, well, you'll have a party. So I paid for everything, and everybody just really said they've never seen anything like that before. We did that in Champaign at the Holiday Inn over there. Now it won't be long. In in 09, it'll be our 50th. So we don't know what we're going to do.
You got time to plan that anyway.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to want to be involved in that.
Oh, any questions that you'd like to ask that weren't, or any closing comments that you'd like to say? Anything in closing for the researchers? Anything special?
Well, I think one of the most important things that I could say is that here at Purdue, you may recall, there was a lot of resistance that focused on the Black Culture Center back in those days. But today, Purdue has a Hispanic, Latino Cultural Center, and a just dedicated an Indian Culture Center, which says that something good has come out of what was been going on that extends to global conditions. I think that the groundwork has been laid for what the center has done and how that can enrich other cultures and other people, Americans all over the world. And I'm surprised they don't have an Asian Culture Center because of the number of Asian alumni, students who attend here. But I'm just surprised that hasn't happened.
Sure.
I would want to say that there is so much that this country has to offer to the world, and that the opportunities are here. We have resources and everything, and I think we should not allow that to get away from us.
Right.
We should build on what we accomplished, particularly since these are difficult times. And I ask God to help us to remove ourselves of some of the hatreds, greed, and things that go on, and that we could move forward to a greater America.
That's right. Good. Thank you very much, Tony.
You're
I
very
really
welcome.
appreciate that. My pleasure. This concludes the interview. Thank you.